Hello students, welcome to the program of medieval education. When you will discuss this subject matter, you will find that you would first develop a general idea about medieval education system. Another objective would be to get a detailed information about the different aspects of Muslim education, such as I said earlier, historical perspective, state patronage of education, and different types of education institutions functioning that time. The third objective would be to get acquainted with different terms used in the Muslim education system, with special reference to the above mentioned aspects, as I said earlier, the historical perspective, types of institutions, etc. And the fourth objective would be to get an idea about the impact of Muslim education on the present educational system in India. The historical perspective. Prophet Muhammad was born in Makkah in 570 AD. He propounded a new religion called Islam in 610 AD when he was about 40 years old. Within a very short period of time, Islam spread not only in the whole of Arabia, but its followers spread over a very wide area of the world. After a lot of untiring efforts, not only did Islamic thought and practice develop and progress, but the Islamic State was also established in the whole of Arabia. With the emergence of Islam and the establishment of Islamic State in Arabia, the attention of Muslims turned towards the non-Arab countries of Asia, including India. Besides others, a noteworthy person, Muhammad bin Qasim, came over to India with the basic objective of spreading Islam in this country. He and his companions settled here, but could establish their sway only over the province of Sindh. After this, there was no external invasion for about 275 years. Many other followers and saints of Islam followed him, Muhammad bin Qasim, for the same purpose, and finally settled in this country. One famous ruler of Ghazni, named Muhammad Ghori, came to India in 1191 AD. with the object to establish his kingdom over here. He failed this time, but finally succeeded in establishing his rule in India in 1194 AD. That is just after 2-3 years. After Muhammad Ghori's death, Qutbuddin Aibak, another king of the same dynasty, ascended the throne and founded another dynasty called Slave Dynasty. Several other dynasties such as Ghulam, Khilji, Tughlaq, Sayyid and Lodi, these were the different dynasties, established their kingdom and Islamic rule in India. Due to these invasions, the culture of the two nations, Arabs and Indians, underwent many changes and at the same time progressed. It's to be noted that it were the Arabs who acquainted the Europeans with the knowledge and wisdom of India. In other words, the whole of the Indian culture or the Asian culture was introduced to Europe by Muslims. Now, regarding the state patronage in educational endeavor, we have many developments, we find many developments. As I said earlier, with the spread of Islam, the attention of Muslim rule turned towards India, and they came here and started to settle firmly in this country. They had mosques and schools constructed in India to make provision for education in Islam and Muslim law. Kings like Altamash, Razia Begum, Nasiruddin, Balban and others had mosques, Maktabs and Madrasas established in this country with the government aid. In the same manner, Firoz Shah Tughlaq made efforts for the propagation of education. One of the schools established by him in Delhi was very famous throughout Asia. Babur founded the Mughal Empire, as you know, in India, which had a very glorious existence for 6 generations till the time of Aurangzeb. Mughal rulers had a relatively greater interest in education, and hence it was in this period that education developed more adequately. They changed the entire ancient Indian educational system and established many educational institutions of different types throughout the country. Akbar particularly evinced deep interest in education to the extent that he authorized translation of many important Indian texts like the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Atharva Veda and the Lilavati into Persian, besides doing a commendable job in spreading education. Jahangir went so far as to enact a law that the property and wealth of a person dying without any heir would be utilized for the repairs of schools and religious buildings. Shah Jahan had a university established near the Jama Masjid in Delhi. Aurangzeb did propagate Muslim education by granting exclusive facilities to Muslim students in terms of free ships, scholarships, hostel facilities and other perks. Let us now see what types of education institutions functioned during the medieval period. Education under the Muslims was of 3 levels. 1, elementary or primary level. 2nd, secondary education level. And 3rd, higher education level. Now, primary education. Primary education was imparted, they were known as Maktabs, whereas Madrasas were the centers of higher education. The Maktabs were usually attached to the mosques, and so would be the Madrasas. But in certain places, these were established in the midst of towns, away from the noise and disturbance of normal human life, that is separate from the hustle and bustle of the life. Let us look into the nature of functioning of these institutions separately. We take up first the Maktabs. The term Maktab is derived from the Arabic word kutub, which means a place where writing is taught. Usually, when a mosque was built, the building of the Maktab was also constructed along with it. Besides Maktabs, there were khanqahs, dargahs and shrines of Muslim saints where education was imparted to the children. Generally, a Maulvi or a religious preceptor we call him, was appointed at these places by the builders of khanqahs and dargahs themselves to teach and guide the students to the path of salvation. The offerings made at these places by the devotees contributed towards the maintenance of these Maulvis, apart from the regular help they received from the patrons of the shrines. Only 3 hours and religious instructions were given to the children at this stage, and every Muslim child was expected to receive education in the Maktabs. That was primary education. Now, the Maktabs were of the following 4 types. First, called Quran schools. The purpose of such schools was to teach the pupils the recitation of Quran. There were no written works or arithmetic teaching or other types of instructions given in these schools. In such schools, learning of Quran and Hadith by heart was emphasized. The second type of school, Maktaba, was known as Persian school. Certain poetical works were taught in such schools. Prominent among them being the works of Sheikh Sadi and Hafiz Shirazi, in addition to Maulana Rumi's Masnavi, etc. The knowledge of Islamic culture contained in these precious books was given to the children in such schools. Sections of these works were learned by heart by the students. Even the Hindus attended such schools and benefited from them. Writing was also taught in these schools, which provided chances of employment to the children. The third type of Maktaba was known as Persian Quran schools. Such schools combined in them features of both the Quran schools and the Persian schools. The students used to learn Quran by heart and also learn its translation in Persian language. The fourth type of Maktaba was known as Arabic school. Now, these schools were meant for adults only and were used for producing full-fledged huffaz, that's a person who knows Quran, who has memorized Quran and knows it by heart and can recite it any time, any moment, in any place. The huffaz of the Quran, Holy Quran, would be prepared in these schools. They used to master Arabic language and learn Quran by heart. Let's now come to secondary education. In the medieval period, the Muslim schools imparting secondary education were known as Madrasas. These Madrasas were institutions of higher education. The first Madrasa was started in Calcutta, which later grew into a mighty college. It had thousands of students on its rolls and was very famous throughout Asia. The Madrasas were managed either by the government or by some good charitable persons. Sometimes jagirs, that is landed property, were gifted to these madrasas by the landlords for their maintenance. They otherwise also contributed to the maintenance and welfare of these institutions. Though imparting of religious education was the main function of these madrasas, other subjects were also taught to the students, which included literature, grammar, history, logic, Muslim law, prosody, etc. Competent and able teachers were appointed in these madrasas by the state or by wealthier and respectable persons of the society. Persian was the medium of instruction in these schools, while every Muslim student had to read Arabic compulsorily, in addition to other subjects. There were high schools also imparting education from 5th to 10th class. These schools were also considered as centers of higher learning and were managed by the government. Now, the third level was higher education level, the institutions of higher education. During the Muslim period, higher education was provided in institutions called Madrasa Aliya or Madrasa Ala. These were known as higher seats of learning and were a sort of colleges in the modern sense of the term. With the passage of time and with increasing interest in higher education, a number of such institutions came up, and each big town had at least one such institution of higher learning. The subjects taught in such institutions were Persian, Arabic, logic, science, grammar, medicine, economics, history, and geometry. Here also, the medium of instruction was Persian, as this was the court language, the language of the courts and the language of offices. And Arabic was a sacred language. It was considered as a sacred language and was compulsory for all. Later, some of these centers were raised to the status of bigger centers of learning and can easily be called universities of the present time. In the medieval period, hostel facilities were also provided to the students, and hostels were usually attached to the madrasas, in which arrangements were made for boarding and lodging of the students by the government. Pocket money was given to the students in these hostels from the monthly monetary grants by the managers. In these hostels, there were arrangements for the abode of teachers as well. The students derived several benefits from the close contacts with the teachers in these hostels. We find in some texts of the medieval period the mention of hospitals and tanks, which we in modern terminology call swimming pools, for swimming having been attached to the hostels or the schools. Hostel life of this period was quite comfortable, as these were usually situated in the midst of towns where all means of comfort could be provided to the students conveniently. Provision of hostel facilities with the above mentioned facilities further helped in popularizing education among the masses. Well, students, with this we conclude today's lecture. I hope you must have enjoyed it. Thank you very much.